Hey guys, tonight we're going back to a world where breakfast wasn't just the most important meal of the diet, was a full-blown imperial operation. You're waking up, not in your cozy bed, but inside the sprawling stone maze of the Topkapi Palace, heart of the Ottoman Empire. Outside, the first light of dawn paints the Bosphorus in milky blue. Inside, an army of chefs is already shuffling around in felt slippers, rattling copper pans, cracking eggs, and whispering about walnuts. Your bed? It's a thin, elegant mattress laid on heated marble floors. Your blanket smells faintly of cloves and sandalwood. You stretch, slowly, because no one in the Sultan's quarters is in a rush. Except, of course, the 66 chefs already panicking over whether the mulberry syrup is too thick. You probably wouldn't survive this place. Not because it's dangerous, though. Sure, poison is a workplace hazard here, but because if you so much as walk in the wrong direction, you might accidentally bow to the wrong eunuch and end up cleaning pigeon coops for the rest of your natural life. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere special, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're nestled inside the Topkapi Palace, sometime in the late 1500s. The palace doesn't sleep, not really. While the Sultan dreams under 7 layers of imported silk, someone is always stoking the coals, polishing a ceremonial scimitar, or quietly steaming rice with cinnamon and mastic. You slide open the thin wooden shutters. Below, a garden glows in the blue twilight roses. Myrtle, fig trees, heavy with fruit. The fountains tinkle, the same way they did yesterday, and the day before, and the century before that. It's oddly eternal, this palace life. And yet, everything hinges on what happens next. The imperial kitchen's matbah, a mirror sprawl, like a hidden city beneath the palace walls. 13 separate kitchens, more than 800 staff in total, and a daily consumption that could feed a modern town. But for now, your eyes settle on a single courtyard where the 66 chefs of breakfast duty begin their sacred task. Their uniforms? Crisp linen. Their expressions? Intense. The goal? One perfect meal for one very powerful stomach. The head cook, the matbah Eminius, already barking orders, though his tone is more lullaby than fury. It's early, after all. The scent of cardamom hangs thick in the air. You hear the swish of ladles in copper pots, the rhythm of pestles grinding nuts into paste. It's not chaos. It's choreography. These chefs aren't just cooks, they're regional specialists, each one an emissary of a distant province. One chef, with oil-burnished arms, is kneading dough sent from Bursa. Another shaves slivers of cured lamb onto gold leaf trays meat, marinated for days, using a recipe older than the empire itself. A third hums gently while inspecting pomegranates for imperfections. The fruit must gleam like rubies. No pressure. The sun peeks over the Sea of Marmara, and now the first pigeons flap down into the gardens. They know what's coming. Leftovers from the imperial breakfast are a bird's dream buffet. You wander closer. There's no door separating you from the steam and spice. Just a low archway carved with floral motifs. You duck under. Instantly, your skin dews with warmth. It smells like roasted sesame, like butter heating on stone, like dried apricots soaking in rosewater. You might never leave. And then you see it, the long, polished tray. The centerpiece of the morning's performance. It gleams under oil lamps. Today's menu is already half assembled. Goat cheese wrapped in grape leaves, simmering white beans with cloves, quail eggs arranged in perfect spirals around a bowl of tamarind yogurt. It looks like breakfast built by engineers. You pause at a side table where two younger apprentices are gently placing pistachio-stuffed pastries into miniature brass cages. Yes, cages. Because apparently, flaky desserts must be protected from flies and ambition. One of the boys sneezes. Everyone freezes. He bows furiously toward the pastry. The breakfast isn't just food, it's symbolism. The empire stretches across 3 continents, and each dish must whisper a reminder of that. The dates from Arabia, the bitter orange jam from Cyprus, the saffron rice from the eastern frontier. Even the salt is layered in meaning-coarse crystals from the Black Sea, rimmed with dust from holy lands. And all this is just the warm-up. By the time the full tray is ready, it will weigh more than you do. The serving platform itself is a marvel constructed from interlocking woods without a single nail, balanced so precisely that it can float in water, which is useful if, say, a breakfast had to be floated across a ceremonial pool. Not saying that's happened. But historians still argue whether Sultan Selim really demanded his poached eggs arrive by gondola. Somewhere deeper in the kitchen wing, you hear the soft, metallic knock of the spice keepers. These menyes, plural, manage the Ottoman Empire's most secure room, the spice vault. It has thicker doors than the treasury. They handle saffron the way jewelers handle diamonds. One man slowly lifts a palm-sized jar and mutters, "Sumac. Aged 6 years. It's like a wine tasting, but for paprika." The spice is handed to a senior chef who nods solemnly and adds a pinch to a bubbling fig compote. Not a dash, not a spoonful, a pinch. Because even breakfast has rules. By now, the palace has begun to stir. Birds trill louder. Eunuchs in pale blue robes glide across polished stone walkways. Servants whisper. The kitchens are still the loudest part of the palace, and even that is a soft hum-like, a hive where bees wear aprons and wield ladles. The only thing louder than the hiss of boiling eggs is the sudden cry of a muezzin calling the first prayer. The sound echoes through the tiled halls, past the rose gardens, over the pomegranate trees, and into the kitchens. Everyone freezes. Then, as if rehearsed, they bow their heads, offer a silent prayer, and resume faster now, because the Sultan is still sleeping. But not for long. And when he wakes, every single dish must be at the perfect temperature. Not hot, not cold, not spicy, not bland, just divine. And you? You've somehow become part of it. Just another figure weaving through this sleepy, delicious machine. You pass a tall marble shelf where dozens of spoons sit like soldiers in formation. One of them, just one, will be chosen for the Sultan's first bite. Made of solid gold, yes. Encrusted with lapis, of course. But more importantly, whisper thin, because the Sultan must not feel its weight in his mouth, only the food. A bell chimes. The final tray is nearly ready. A steward runs past with a bowl of fresh clotted cream, wrapped in linen, soaked with lavender water. You don't even question it. You just inhale deeply and sigh. The palace is nearly awake now, but for this one moment, this fleeting, fragrant second, you exist in the calm eye of the empire's culinary storm, one breath before the Sultan stirs. The kitchen is humming now, not with noise exactly, but with a kind of pressure, a silent countdown that every chef feels in their bones. The palace clock hasn't struck. There is no bell. But still, every person in this sprawling underground sanctum knows it's time. Breakfast must begin its final movement. You follow the head cook, his robes trailing slightly behind him, like the tail of a comet. He doesn't rush. He glides. There is a rhythm to his steps, a music that no one else can hear, yet every cook dances to. A flick of his hand summons 6 assistants. They descend on the tray with uncanny synchronicity, lifting, adjusting, rotating platters. One gently places a blossom on the corner of a bowl. Not just for show, the Sultan likes his yogurt garnished with edible flowers, preferably ones picked just before dawn. To your left, a man with arms the size of tree trunks carefully lifts a silver urn of salepa, creamy orchid root drink, so thick it barely stirs. It smells like snow and cinnamon. He walks with the focus of a man carrying ancient secrets. You trail them to the edge of the harem gate, the invisible line between the kitchens and the inner sanctum. No chef crosses without clearance. This is the Sultan's private sphere, his world of rose-scented air, silk carpets, and a silence so complete it feels padded. But the food goes in, and what an entrance it makes. The main tray 5 feet long, perfectly balanced carried by 4 men. They walk with slow reverence, their arms trembling not from the weight, but from what it represents. Every dish is a whisper of empire, a reminder of conquest, culture, and control. Each plate a handshake between the Sultan and a distant province that dare not displease. You, somehow, are allowed to follow. The halls narrow. The tiles change from the warm, reddish stone of the kitchens to the cool, glazed blues of the Sultan's wing. The scent changes, too. Less spice, more musk and rosewater, and quieter still. You could hear a spoon drop. Eventually, the tray reaches the breakfast antechamber, a room unlike any dining hall you've ever seen. No table, no chairs. Just a raised dais covered in cushions and a low, ornately carved stand where the meal will be placed. This is the moment the orchestra begins. Each chef has a role. One fans the dishes with a palm leaf to keep away dust. Another adjusts the room's vents to let in the faintest breeze from the Bosphorus. A third tests the salop's warmth again, still perfect. If it drops 2 degrees, it's ruined. And no one wants to remake salop. You step back into a shadowed alcove, watching. It's like seeing the inner gears of a very quiet clock. And still, no Sultan. He sleeps. Behind a golden lattice, in a room beyond your reach, the ruler of the empire slumbers on a low platform bed, surrounded by silence, wealth, and the faint floral echo of his own power. And while he sleeps, 66 chefs tiptoe. Some are still at work, in fact. Back in the kitchens, someone has noticed that the apricot compote is 1 fig short. Disaster. A boy races out to the garden with a basket. Not any fig will do't, must be the ones touched by morning dew. Why? No one remembers. But the rule remains. Meanwhile, another team of cooks works on a replacement dish. Not because anything failed, but because a dream once convinced the Sultan to crave honeyed almonds at breakfast, and now they must always be ready, just in case. You lean against a carved column, blinking slowly, the scent of warm almonds making you drowsy. Then you hear it. A stir. It begins with a slippered foot on marble. Then the soft rustle of fabric. A cough. The Sultan is awake, and the palace holds its breath. Behind the screen, you see shadows moving. Attendants light a single oil lamp. Another brings the Sultan's outer robe hand-embroidered silk, blue like the deep sea. You glimpse the edge of a beard, then the gold tip of a walking stick. And finally, him. He does not speak. He nods once, and the chefs move. The tray is slid forward. A warm towel is offered. A dish uncovered. The Sultan picks up his spoon. Yes, that spoon. The one that's technically a national treasure. It glimmers in the low light. He dips it, ever so gently, into the tamarind yogurt. Lifts. Tastes. You hold your breath. He nods. Nothing else. No praise, no smile. Just the smallest nod. And just like that, the empire exhales. One by one, dishes are offered. Not all are touched. Some are lifted, sniffed, and passed by. Others vanish with practiced speed. You watch him select a curl of honeyed eggplant and raise an eyebrow. He doesn't speak, but you get the sense he's remembering a garden in Edern or a summer night from long ago. Then it's gone. There's a rhythm to it now. Spoon, taste, pause. Spoon, chew, glance. Servants hover like ghosts. The food disappears slowly, methodically. Sometimes, an aide scribbles something in a leather-bound book. Did the Sultan like the rice more today? Did he ignore the rose jam again? Is that a hint? Because make no mistake, this breakfast is a performance. Every bite tells his court something. If he favors Armenian pastries this week, maybe Armenia is in favor. If he refuses the Bosnian sausage, trouble in the Balkans. The breakfast tray is a subtle, edible policy speech. You hear a whisper behind you. Two eunuchs quietly debate whether the Sultan truly enjoyed the bitter orange marmalade, or if he merely tolerated it. Historians still argue whether these subtle breakfast cues shaped regional decisions. One footnote from a scribe about a rejected melon sparked years of research. Outside, the light grows stronger. Morning is in full bloom. And yet, within these walls, it's still a dream. Everything is quiet, intentional, holy. Even the act of drinking water is a ceremony. A crystal goblet appears imported from Venice. The water is chilled with ice from distant mountains, stored in deep cellars wrapped in straw. It smells faintly of mint. The Sultan sips, sets it down. You find yourself entranced. There's no rush, no conversation. Just this silent exchange between power and flavor. Then unexpectedly he laughs. Only once. A soft, throaty chuckle. Oned leans forward. The Sultan mutters something about the way the pistachios are chopped. Too perfect. He jokes they were probably measured with a compass. Everyone in the room grins, except the chefs. They're now terrified. Should pistachios be more rustic next time? The moment passes. Another dish is lifted. The breakfast continues. You watch as spoons are traded, cups replaced, and sauces stirred mid-meal. A man enters quietly with a live coal to rewarm a copper dish without changing its flavor. This is precision on the edge of obsession, but no one dares break it. Because this is the Sultan's morning. And if you're very lucky, you'll live long enough to see the tray leave the room, empty. Back in the kitchen wing, the energy has shifted. You feel it the moment you step through the archway. It's not relief, exactly. No one relaxes just yet. But the anxiety that curled around the morning has loosened its grip. The tray is in motion. The Sultan is eating. And that means for now, the world is in balance. Still, the work doesn't stop. Across the courtyard, a pair of junior cooks are already preparing backup versions of dishes just in case something on the main tray was found lacking. Not because they expect criticism, but because protocol demands options. After all, the Sultan might suddenly crave kaymaklu ekmek kadayufa, dense syrup-soaked bread pudding topped with clotted cream and, if it's not within reach in under 2 minutes, someone's slippers will be on fire metaphorically. You wander through the lesser kitchen halls, now rooms not usually seen by outsiders. Here, copper pots hang like trophies, and every counter is scrubbed with vinegar until it gleams like marble. The air is thick with cloves, garlic, and wood smoke. Somewhere, a pot simmers lazily over an open flame. But these aren't your loud, chaotic restaurant kitchens. No clattering pans. No shouting. It's a soft symphony of movement, always dignified, always rehearsed. In a far corner, you find the chef of Fisha, tall man with a perfectly trimmed mustache and the gentle eyes of someone who stared down a sea base and won. He's not cooking breakfast today, but he's always on hand. The Sultan might decide that morning is the right moment for smoked sturgeon. If so, this man will produce it. Warm and fragrant. In under 10 minutes. Garnished with lemon peel, in the shape of a tulip. He nods as you pass, then returns to his slicing paper-thin ribbons of eel, arranged like scrolls. No one is watching. No one needs to. His hands remember. You slip past a side door into a dimly lit corridor lined with storage jars. It feels more like a treasure vault than a pantry. Dried rose petals, saffron threads packed in linen, pickled walnuts, jars of mulberry syrup sealed with wax, each labeled in a language you can't read. Some of these ingredients came from the farthest edges of the empire. Others from beyond it. Venetian merchants sneaking silken plums through Alexandria. Spice traders risking sandstorms for a pinch of long pepper. Every item, hand-selected and triple-checked before entering the royal kitchens. You pause at one jar filled with something dark and shiny. An assistant passing by whispers, "Candied eggplant." You blink. It smells like cinnamon, fig, and mystery. You reach out, he slaps your hand away with a grin. "For the Sultan," he says, and winks. You hear footsteps behind you, and before you can turn, a young boy barrels through, carrying a tray of boiled eggs with a small velvet pouch hanging from his waist. He's panting. "Nutmeg emergency," he mutters. You decide not to ask. Down another corridor, the taste tester prepares for his moment of truth. Yes, he's real. No, he doesn't wear armor. Just a clean robe, a small silver spoon, and an unsettling calm. You watch him sit before a small side table loaded with duplicates of every item that went on the Sultan's tray. He doesn't rush. He tastes deliberately. A sliver of cheese, a spoonful of soup, a bite of bread. After each, he closes his eyes, waits, listens to his own body, not for flavor, but for signs of, well, doom. You're watching a man whose job is to hope his breakfast doesn't kill him, and he's so calm about it. He finishes with a single pickled olive, sighs, and wipes his mouth. "Good day," he says aloud. Not because it is, but because he is still breathing. Everyone else in the room nods. The olive gets a little gold star next to its name on the kitchen ledger. There's a reason this ritual matters. While poisoning is largely mythologized in stories of empires, it's not entirely fiction. Historians still argue whether Sultan Mustafa's mental decline was caused by inherited instability by slow poisoning from lead-laced ceramic glazes in his dining ware. Scholars also debate if the Sultan's chefs were ever truly tested for loyalty or just made scapegoats for political missteps. Whatever the truth, the taste tester's role remains sacred. He is the invisible guardian of breakfast. If he falls, breakfast ends. Possibly permanently. You head upstairs now, tracing the path servants take when summoned. These aren't the bustling main halls of the palace. These are slender, echoing staircases hidden between walls. Behind you, a cook hums softly, carrying a tray of steamed apricot dumplings. You catch a glimpse of him mouthing a prayer. It's a surreal thing seeing this much care for a single meal. But this is no ordinary household. The Sultan's breakfast is also his medicine, his message, his mood ring. What he eats and how he reacts sets the tone for the day. You enter a high balcony with a lattice screen overlooking the garden. From here, you hear the birds again. A single hawk circles above, its wings slicing the morning sky. A servant beside you whispers, "He always comes when the Sultan eats." You smile. The palace has watchers of every kind. Back in the kitchen courtyard, the air has shifted again. A bell rings soft, like a wind chime. It means the Sultan has finished his first course. The second wave begins. Yes, there's a second course. You didn't think 66 chefs stopped at yogurt and bread, did you? This is where the show begins. One chef lights a charcoal brazier and begins roasting pistachio lamb skewers. Another flambés figs in date liquor under a copper hood. And deep in the sweets kitchen, yes, there's a dedicated sweets kitchen. 3 women in silk aprons knead sugar into chewy strands for the Sultan's preferred Cesare, a carrot paste candy so rich it makes your molars ache just looking at it. The second tray assembles. It's smaller, but more luxurious. Duck eggs, wrapped in vine leaves. Pastries shaped like roses. Candied orange peel laid in perfect spirals around a dish of whipped mastic cream. You're not even hungry, but your stomach growls. The head cook nods. Another quiet procession begins. And still, the Sultan eats alone. You ask a steward why. He shrugs and says, "Kings dine in silence. Companions come with dinner." You get the sense this isn't about loneliness. It's about power. The only sound in that room is the sound of chewing and the Sultan's thoughts. Outside, the sun is now climbing high. Light dances on the tiled roofs of Topkapi. Birds trill. The world wakes. But here, in the kitchen world beneath the palace, time doesn't move forward. It simmers. You pass by a doorway, where 3 boys are fanning a pot of rosewater syrup, chanting a rhythmic rhyme to keep time. One turns to you and says, "We boil until the air smells like spring." Then he turns back to his task, fanning in unison. You don't even question it anymore. In a quiet corner, a scribe records the entire menu in looping Ottoman script. The name of every dish, the ingredients, the mood of the Sultan, as perceived from the depth of his sighs. This document will be stored in the Royal Meal Archive, a vast library of breakfasts no one will ever read but must exist, just in case. You close your eyes. The smell of bread, the warmth of steam, the low murmur of chef sits hypnotic. You forget what year it is, who you are. You're just a shadow among shadows, watching the last empire eat its morning poetry, one golden spoonful at a time. You're not sure how long you've been wandering these corridors of steam and cinnamon, but the light outside is shifting less blue now, more gold. The second course has been delivered. The Sultan is deep in his post-honeyed melon reverie, and the palace is finally exhaling. So, now you slip further inward. You pass under a low arch where a pair of guards stand in silence, their hands resting lightly on the hilts of ceremonial scimitars they'll never unsheath. You nod. They don't blink. Behind them lies the heart of it, all the Sultan's private domain. The Enderun. The inner palace. A palace within a palace. And no, this isn't the part filled with grand ballrooms or vast fountains. Those are for foreign envoys. This space is secret, hushed, built not for show, but for comfort, control, and perfect stillness. You pad through a series of small, jewel-toned courtyards, each one more serene than the last. The air is perfumed with crushed mint leaves and myrtle. Carpets lie thick as moss underfoot. The architecture here is delicate slender columns, stained glass windows, painted ceilings with geometric stars. No noise, not even bird song. You begin to understand. This place is designed to muffle the world. A soft meow breaks the silence. You glance down. A golden-eyed cat stretches luxuriously across a silk cushion. She doesn't acknowledge you. She is, clearly, nobility. Cats roam freely here, protected, even honored. Rumor has it, one was once buried with more ceremony than a provincial governor. A robed eunuch glides past, slippers whispering over the tile. He holds a scroll in one hand and a dish of rose-flavored almonds in the other. No one speaks. Everyone knows their rhythm, their station, their place in this quiet galaxy of routine. And you? You just observe. You arrive at the privy chamber, the most sacred and secluded room in the palace. It's not especially large. In fact, it's cozy. A fireplace glows quietly at one end. The walls are lined with golden tiles that flicker in the lamplight. Above, a domed ceiling twinkles with painted stars. This is where the Sultan receives his closest advisors, or sometimes simply sits. But he's not here now. He's still finishing breakfast in the adjacent ruminating alone, bathed in dappled morning light, guarded by silence and a spoon that could bankrupt a small village. So you explore. On a low, lacquered shelf, books lie open, some written in Arabic, some in Persian, some in Ottoman Turkish, with a script so elegant it could seduce a stone. Many of them are poetry. The Sultanthus one, at least, is known for composing verse between bites of cheese and war declarations. Historians still debate whether these poems were serious art or just breakfast musings disguised in metaphor. Either way, they're recorded in the court archive, catalogued under digestive reflection. You sit briefly beside a fountain built directly into the wall. It trickles gently, the sound carefully calibrated to echo like a babbling brook, soothing but not distracting. They say this was the Sultan's favorite sound, the constant hush of moving water. Maybe it helped him think. Maybe it reminded him that empires, like fountains, must be maintained or they go dry. From beyond a carved wooden screen, you hear a soft clink. The Sultan has finished something. Possibly the candied almonds. Possibly a thought. A servant steps forward with a small lacquered box. Inside are silks for wiping his hands, not towels. Silks. Each one embroidered with the seal of the empire. Disposable in the sense that they'll be washed, blessed, and folded back into rotation by a special team of linen attendants who specialize in imperial napkin lore. A calligrapher arrives next. Not to write proclamations, no. His job this morning is purely aesthetic. He brings a scroll and ink, just in case the Sultan wishes to record a thought inspired by breakfast, or correct a proverb, or doodle. No one questions it. You retreat again, further into the domestic quarter of the palace where even fewer eyes may go. Here you find the imperial wardrobe room, a chamber larger than most village inns, filled with tunics, sashes, turbans, and robes arranged with frightening precision. A head steward is inspecting today's selection for post-breakfast lounging. A robe of deep green velvet, lined with ermine, scented with ambergris. Yes, lounging robes are scented. Naturally. Next to the wardrobe sits the spoon cabinet. Not a joke. A real, carved cedar cabinet filled with spoons. Gold, silver, ebony, mother of pearl. Some are thin as reeds, others thick and round for stews. Each spoon has a name, a history. Some were gifts from foreign rulers. Others made by palace artisans. One, you're told, was once blessed by a wandering mystic and is only used on Thursdays. Why Thursday? Historians still argue. In the background, another bell chimes, this one smaller, quieter. It signals that the Sultan has completed his meal. The breakfast is over. But the day has only just begun. You follow the returning tray through another rowdione reserved for used dishes. Not a single item goes uncounted. Each spoon checked, each plate inspected. One of the porcelain cups has a faint crack. A steward frowns. A note is made. That cup will be removed, repaired, then possibly retired with honors. The breakfast tray passes through the hall of servants, where dozens of kitchen workers gather in rows to watch it return. Some glance anxiously at what wasn't eaten. Others note which dishes came back, scraped clean. It's more than gossip. This determines tomorrow's menu. You hear murmurs. He finished the quince compote. He didn't touch the trout eggs. Twice in a row he ignored the Bosnian sausage. The head cook nods grimly. Adjustments must be made. In the far corner, a chalkboard lists dish rotations like battle plans. 3 meals ahead. Ingredients needed. Potential themes. Apparently, Wednesday might be Black Sea morning. A favorite of the Sultan's mother. Which means anchovies for everyone. The kitchen groans. The returned dishes are taken into the scullery hall, where another team of workers begins the silent, slow task of cleaning. Not just scrubbing, purifying. Each item is washed in water infused with herbs lavender, thyme, sometimes crushed lemon peel. Not to kill germs, but to remove the scent of power, to make the dishes new again. The stewards place the breakfast notes into a leather ledger. This volume, when filled, will be stitched and shelved in the Imperial Archive. You're beginning to suspect the Ottoman Empire might have had more paperwork than soldiers. And still, everything remains hushed. There is no celebration, no applause, no slapping of backs or spilled wine. The Sultan has eaten. The ritual is complete. But you know what's remarkable? He still hasn't spoken a single word. Not once. And yet, through the placement of a spoon, the glance at a bowl, the refusal of a fig, he has spoken volumes. This is the language of empire. Edible, ephemeral, and fiercely observed. You head toward the outer courtyard again, where a gentle breeze rustles the tall cypress trees. One of the younger cooks sits alone on a bench, peeling almonds by hand. He doesn't look up, just says softly, "Tomorrow's breakfast starts now." You believe him. You return to the courtyard just as the smell of bread fresh, yeasty, warm wafts up from the ovens. The bread makers, or ekmekçiler, are at work again. But this time, the atmosphere is lighter. The frenzy has eased into routine. The first round of breakfast is over, but the palace doesn't stop for a full stomach. In fact, some parts are just beginning their shift. You follow the trail of warm scent to a lower, domed chamber that looks like the interior of a kiln. This is the Imperial Bread Hall, a vaulted room humming with quiet purpose. Large, circular ovens are built directly into the walls, their openings glowing orange like sleepy dragon eyes. Inside, flatbreads puff into golden cushions, their edges browning in gentle swirls. Here's where the empire starts to taste like itself. There isn't just one kind of bread, of course. The Ottomans were not a people to settle for simplicity when opulence was possible. There are sourdough loaves shaped like moons, ringed simit covered in sesame seeds from Syria, and tiny delicate rolls infused with rosewater and crushed fennel. One baker folds grape leaves into a stack of flatbreads for the Sultan's mother, who finds them calming. Another gently paints saffron symbols onto small rolls, just in case they make it to the Sultan's midday tea. You sit for a moment on a warm bench beside one of the ovens. A boy offers you a piece of honey bread. It's still steaming, sweetened with figs and dusted with anise. You bite into it. You close your eyes. For a second, the entire empire vanishes behind that taste. Across from you, an older baker-thee, kind whose hands are always covered in floor chuckles. "Bread," he says, "is the quiet diplomacy of breakfast." You raise an eyebrow. he explains. Bread is neutral. Bread travels well. Bread, when sent to distant provinces with the Sultan's seal, is a reminder. We feed you. You belong. Historians still debate whether bread shipments from Topkapi actually helped prevent regional rebellions or were just symbolic. But records show loaves arriving by boat in Aegean ports, wrapped in muslin, as subtle messages of favor warnings. A little stale, perhaps, by the time they arrived, but deeply political nonetheless. Back in the courtyard, a new flurry of motion catches your eye. A pair of guards escort a small delivery. A box of pistachios, sealed with wax and a velvet ribbon. The box is from Antep, the city known across the empire for its nuts. You trail them as they pass beneath a shaded walkway, flanked by carved wooden panels depicting food rituals from previous reigns. They stop at the flavor registry office. Yes, you heard that right. Inside, a scribe gently opens the box and lifts a handful of pistachios to his nose. He closes his eyes, breathes in. Still fragrant, he says softly. Another clerk records this in a ledger. Pistachios, Antep batch, 3rd moon of spring, acceptable. A sealed sample is placed in a silk pouch and filed away. For reference, you move on through a shaded colonnade, passing windows that peek into smaller kitchen satellite rooms where specialized foods are prepared away from the chaos of the main matbah. One room is for dairy alone, another for fruit compotes. A third, you're told, is just for melons. You stop short. Melons? A young cook nods. The Sultan favors them sliced thin, kept on chilled marble, turned hourly. You peer through the tiny arched door. Inside, 2 men are slicing Karpuz watermelon from Egypt. Each piece is fanned across a plate like fish scales. One of the men squints, adjusting the angle of a slice by less than a finger's width. That's the 3rd tray, the other murmurs. The light wasn't catching it right the first time. It's a detail so obsessive you want to laugh. And you do. Quietly. Because you're starting to understand something strange about the Ottoman breakfast. It's not just about flavor, or ritual, or power. It's about perfection. This isn't food for nourishment. It's food as reflection. The Sultan's breakfast is the empire dreaming itself into existence each morning, on porcelain dishes and golden spoons. Outside, pigeons swirl in lazy circles above the domes. One lands beside a fountain, pecking at a crumb left behind. It is a blessed bird, like all palace pigeons. They are fed, protected, even spoken to. One bird, an elderly white speckled thing with a crooked toe, is called Pasha. Some say the Sultan once laughed at his waddle. Others say he whispers secrets to him during lunch. Again, historians can't quite agree. In the shadows near the stables, you overhear a stable master telling a kitchen boy, "Today he ate the sweet lentils. That's a good omen." The boy nods solemnly, as if he's just heard news of a diplomatic victory. You lean against a pillar. Everything here is a signal. And every signal matters. And now, it's time for you to revisit the tray. It has been returned, polished, its contents recorded and preserved in memory. The chief steward is holding a quiet conference with his scribes under a cypress tree. They discuss what to keep, what to change, what to elevate. Did the Sultan linger over the almond milk longer than usual? Was the cracked pepper slightly coarser today? Nearby, a messenger from the imperial astrologer arrives with a wax-sealed scroll. It contains the Sultan's horoscope for the day, calculated using the position of the sun, moon, and yes, what he ate this morning. The astrologer keeps detailed records of celestial events alongside breakfast notes, believing that the Sultan's digestion is deeply entwined with the fate of the empire. You glance at the scroll as it's opened. Avoid matters of silver and horses. Favor rose water and restraint. Someone murmurs, "No stewed veal tomorrow, then." The scroll is filed. The message noted. And so the wheel turns. In the kitchen, the ovens are being cleared. Fires stoked for later meals. The breakfast chefs remove their aprons. Some head to prayer. Others head to the dormitories, exhausted but pleased. One clutches a tiny notia commendation for syrup consistency to share with his grandmother later. A cat leaps from a windowsill and walks between your legs, tail high. You follow. Back to the courtyard, where light pours like honey across the stone. A table has been set for the kitchen staff, now flatbread, olives, strong tea brewed thick enough to float a coin. Laughter echoes softly. It's not loud, but it's there. The breakfast has ended. The empire is fed. And for a moment, just a moment, everything is still. The Sultan is no longer eating, which means everything changes. Not visibly, perhaps. The marble still gleams. The fountains still whisper. But beneath the serene surface of the palace, gears begin to turn. Now the real court begins. You slip behind the procession of silent stewards, returning the final dishes-small bowls of rose-petal preserves, a last wedge of date-stuffed cheese, the spoon placed gently into its velvet-lined box. The breakfast, you realize, is never quite done. It simply fades, like a dream at dawn. And that's when it happens. A single word from the Sultan, not shouted, not announced, just spoken into the air, received by an attendant, then passed along like a breath of wind. And suddenly, everyone moves. This morning, the Sultan has asked for a meeting. So now, while the plates are still warm, the realm's power begins to stir. Viziers straighten their robes. Messengers hurry down corridors. A general adjusts his sash and debates whether to bring the map again or just wing it. There's no schedule. There never is. You're in a world of shadows and signal fires, and today's political weather is cinnamon-scented and unusually alert. You follow the ripple of change to the Imperial Council Hall the Divan, Uhumayun. Not quite a war room, but not far from it. A chamber built for serious eyebrows and important size. Here, under a vaulted ceiling painted in lapis and gold, men will gather to discuss taxes, wars, marriages, and if they're very lucky, desserts. But before anyone speaks, they wait. Because first, the Sultan finishes his tea. Yes, this is part of the process. A final glass of tea, black as ink and twice as bitter, is sipped in a quiet chamber just off the main hall. No servant pours it. The tea is placed on a low table, perfectly steeped, and left to wait for him. Some say the way he lifts the cup slowly, or quickly predicts the tone of the coming council. Today he lifts it slowly. This might not be a good thing. You return to the kitchens briefly, now humming with quieter purpose. Midday preparations are beginning, but nothing is louder than the debate over whether the Sultan's breakfast demeanor was contemplative or merely bored. The chefs have opinions. Did you see how he dabbed at his mouth after the almond paste? He always does that. Not with the left hand. That means he was annoyed. Historians would be horrified to know that half the diplomatic policy of 16th century Anatolia may have hinged on how firmly the Sultan patted his lips. And yet, this is how things work. The Sultan's moods read like tea leaves, interpreted through spoon angle-shape. What happens next? You hear one steward say to another, "He left the rose jam untouched." The other one nods gravely. Then the Persian envoy will not be received today. Whether that's official policy or superstition, no one can say. But it's written down, just in case. And now, with the breakfast table cleared and the teacup returned, the Sultan steps into the hall. You aren't allowed in Sedano yet. but through a carved screen you watch. He walks slowly, not lazily, but deliberately. As if each step matters, he wears a soft robe, one not yet stiff with ceremony, and his eyes are distant. That means he's still digesting, not just the meal, the decisions. Behind him, a page carries a thin folder of documents. Among them, the list of who made what at breakfast. Yes, it's true. Each chef's contribution is logged, graded, and reviewed. Not publicly. This isn't a culinary game show, but in private. The Sultan has favorite chefs. He also has chefs who are mysteriously reassigned to camel hair inventory duty. You step away as the council doors close. And suddenly, you find yourself heading back to the kitchens not because you're hungry, but because that's where the real post-breakfast stories begin. There, in the steamy half-light, a group of chefs is seated cross-legged on a worn carpet. They're sharing tea, bread, and memories of breakfast menus past. One elderly cook is telling the story of the time the Sultan requested nothing but yogurt for a week. Everyone chuckles. The tale is famous. But did he eat it all 7 days? Someone asks. No, the elder grins. By day 4, he threw the spoon at the wall and asked for eel. Laughter. You sit. They offer you bread. It's still warm. Want to hear the story of the lost caviar spoon? Someone asks. You nod, and the tale begins. A misdelivered spoon. A frantic sprint across the gardens. A cat who refused to move from the path, and a very confused eunuch who ended up serving sorbet with a ladle. It's all true. Probably. As you chew, you look around. These aren't just kitchen workers. They're artists, diplomats, risk-takers. Each dish they make is a political maneuver. Each breakfast, a small act of worship or survival. The head sweetmaker leans over and whispers, "Did you notice he ignored the cinnamon figs today?" You nod. We'll need to rethink tomorrow. And just like that, a menu begins to shift. One taste gone, another to replace it. Not because of flavor, but because flavor means something. It always does here. A young apprentice walks by, holding a small pot of mint yogurt. Left over, he says. Still perfect. No one touches it, because it wasn't chosen. And in this palace, chosen food is sacred. You wander outside again. The sun is high. The courtyards are quiet. Somewhere, a peacock shrieks. Somewhere else, a page drops a platter and earns the silence of 100 glares. But overall, peace. The Sultan is in council, the chefs are resting, and the kitchens, like the empire, hum just below the surface, ever ready. You pause under a fig tree. Its branches curl protectively above you. You sit, think, wonder. Is this what breakfast is supposed to be? A ceremony? A strategy? A spell? You close your eyes, and suddenly, you hear it again. The tray, being polished, because tomorrow is already on the horizon, and the Sultan will be hungry. Again, it's late morning now, and the palace is slowly transitioning into its next phase. Political theater, garden strolls, and more scrolls than anyone should reasonably be expected to read before lunch. But you're back on the scent trail. Not of intrigue this time, but of saffron, thyme, and sizzling clarified butter. You're heading toward the taster's alcove, a shadowed corner of the imperial kitchen complex. The alcove is where the quietest, most high-stakes job in the palace begins each morning, far earlier than you'd guess. The air here smells sharper than the rest of the matbah, less sweet, more savory. Like someone is always slightly worried the soup is too perfect to be trusted. And that someone, of course, is the taste tester. He doesn't wear any medals. There's no fanfare. but you can feel the difference in the way others regard him, as if he's already halfway ghost. He sits cross-legged on a low cushion, robes clean, spoon in hand, a line of dishes before him like a general surveying the front line. He's already tasted this morning's offerings hours ago, of course. He lived. That's the baseline. But now he's tasting again, for notes, for shifts, for the silent, invisible hands that may try to shape the Sultan's future through apricot glaze. You settle beside a younger apprentice who watches the taste tester with awe. He once detected arsenic in goat's milk by smell alone. He whispers, "Saved half the court." You raise an eyebrow, or, the boy shrugs, he just didn't like goat's milk. Either way, they gave him a silver spoon. Historians still argue whether the position of royal food taster was more ceremony than safety net. But one surviving edict from the reign of Mehmed II outlines exactly how much poison allowance a dish must pass before being declared safe. So, yes, the risk was real. The taster finishes a sample and sets the spoon aside. One eyebrow lifts. A steward approaches nervously. "It's fine," the taster says. "But the lemon syrup is cloudy. Either the cook overboiled it, or someone's trying to signal that Cyprus is displeased again." The steward bows. The syrup will be remade, because in top copy, even opacity is political. You stroll back toward the courtyard kitchens as a servant passes you with a bowl of vinegar water for hand rinsing. Another carries a tray of sliced pears arranged to resemble battle formations. A third trails behind, with only a small jar labeled simply, "just in case." You begin to notice the kitchen's duality more clearly now. On one hand, it's deeply spiritual. Chefs murmur short prayers as they fold pastry dough. A fig is placed on the tray stem side, an ancient superstition meant to honor the sun. On the other hand, this place is rife with scheming, because every dish is a ladder. You turn a corner and enter a spice-scented room buzzing with voices. It's the proposal kitchen. Not for weddings, for menu proposals. Yes, proposals. Chefs pitch new creations like merchants hawking inventions. One stands by a steaming pot, nervously spooning out samples to a panel of senior cooks. You hear murmured critique. "Too tar. Too French. Needs more memory." You blink. More memory? The panel head, a heavy-lidded man with a saffron-stained beard, sighs. The Sultan eats with memory. If the food doesn't feel like something he once ate as a child or something he should have, then what's the point? The proposal is rejected. The chef sighs and bows. Tomorrow, he'll try again. You walk on, deeper into the lesser-known chambers. Here is where the leftover ledger is kept, an actual parchment scroll, listing what remains of every breakfast. It is read by the steward of redistribution, a man whose job is to assign food to palace residents according to importance, mood, and whether they've annoyed anyone recently. You peer at today's entry. Goat cheese with pine resin, 2 portions, Janissary officers. Rose petal jam, untouched. Vizier's niece, possibly an omen. Melon slices, rearranged mid-meal. Laundry guild, ambiguous taste. Even leftovers have a pecking order. You follow the steward as he carries a tray of slightly chilled pastries down a winding hallway. "These will go to the library scribes. They read better when sugared," he says with a wink. You glance into a side chamber where 2 older chefs are reviewing a scroll of culinary crimes. Yes, culinary crimes. Offenses include overspicing the Sultan's rice, serving lukewarm yogurt, accidentally placing lamb beside fish, a known philosophical faux pas. Punishments range from being reassigned to lentil duty for a month, to exile to the vinegar shed. You shudder. Even vinegar duty sounds sticky. Another hallway leads you to the ingredient judgment room, a domed chamber where shipments are tasted, tested, and sometimes dramatically rejected. A man with a silver ladle and a taste for theatrics dramatically spits out a sample of pomegranate molasses onto the tile. Too bold, he says. The Sultan prefers diplomacy in his syrups. The supplier bows. No one argues. You pause in front of a small shrine of sorts, a shelf dedicated to the perfect breakfast. No one explains it to you, but you understand. There's a reverence to the way it's kept. An empty golden dish, a dried flower, a spoon with a crack, so fine it's barely visible. A sign above reads, in fading calligraphy, "He ate it all," and smiled. You don't know which Sultan. Maybe no one does. But the story lives. Back in the main hallway, you pass a gathering of young apprentices crowded around a fire, debating tomorrow's pastry fillings. "Quince," says one. "Too political," says another. "The Greeks sent quince last week." He ignored it. "Then lemon?" "Too French." "Mastic?" A pause, murmured approval. Someone scribbles a note. The flavor wheel turns. And now, just as you begin to think you've seen every inch of this strange, edible empire, you hear a sound unlike any other. Laughter. Real, carefree, weary but happy laughter. You follow it to the edge of the garden kitchens. There, in a shaded stone alcove, several chefs are seated, eating plain bread with tomatoes and olives. Their robes are loosened. Their shoes kicked off. Their hands still smell faintly of nutmeg. "Tomorrow," one says, "he might ask for nothing but cucumbers." They all groan. "Or dried melon soup again," another says, dramatically clutching his chest. Someone tosses a bread crust at him. You sit with them, quietly, and it hits you. For all the perfection demanded, for all the weight each dish carries, these people, these chefs, stewards, tasters, and tea brewers love what they do. It's not just service. It's artistry. It's mythology. It's breakfast. But also not. It's empire. Ritual. History. Devotion. All hidden in a spoonful of honey or a crumble of cheese. The Sultan may have finished eating, but for these chefs, tomorrow's menu has already begun to bloom in their minds like steam, rising from a pot no one can quite see yet. You leave the garden alcove where the chef's laughter still lingers like wood smoke in the air. It's late morning now, almost noon, and the palace has settled into its daily rhythm. But here, in the kitchens, the undercurrent never stops. You head back inside, this time through a narrow side passage, and find yourself standing before a carved wooden door, flanked by two tall clay urns of water, covered in embroidered cloth. A small golden sign above reads, "Rules for the Sultan's table." Not a warning, not exactly a guideline, more like gospel. A steward glides past, notices your curiosity, and whispers, "You want to understand the empire? Read this before you even look at a spoon." So you, though. The rules are short, simple even, but heavy with meaning. Rule 1. The Sultan must never eat with his left hand. Rule 2. No meal may begin without the recitation of Bismillah. Rule 3. The first taste shall always be yogurt. Rule 4. Silence must reign from the first bite until the last. Rule 5. No dish may be served twice in 3 days, unless requested. Rule 6. Nothing sour may follow something sweet. You pause at that last one, a culinary commandment or a metaphor for diplomacy. The steward shrugs. "Both," he says. He once had honeyed almonds, followed by pickled onions. We didn't see the head cook for a week. You wander deeper into the palace, the weight of these rituals pressing gently against you. They're not arbitrary. They're cultural code, each one layered with centuries of meaning. The yogurt rule alone dates back to the earliest Turkic nomads, who believed fermented milk calmed the spirit and sealed the stomach against evil. In fact, the entire flow of the meal from warm to cool, bland to rich, savory to sweeties choreographed, not for flavor, but balance, harmony. Every bite exists in relation to the one before and the one after. You pass the portion hall, where meals are plated not for serving but for inspection. Yes, inspection. Because presentation is as important as taste. A slightly off-center fig could signal chaos. A misplaced spoon? Treason. There's a story among the chefs told in hushed tones about the time a new apprentice placed the soup bowl on the right instead of the left. The Sultan didn't touch it, didn't speak, just stood up and walked out. The next day, every spoon in the palace was polished 3 times over. The apprentice? Promoted to egg duty. For life. You chuckle softly. You can't tell if the story's true. It doesn't matter. Here, the story is everything. You slip into the spoonmaker's studio, a quiet, vaulted room with arched windows spilling golden light across a long table. Rows upon rows of handcrafted spoons lie in narrow drawers lined with velvet. Some are carved from olive wood, others from horn or cherry bark. The gold ones are kept in a locked cabinet, of course. But the artistry of the simpler ones is breathtaking. A tiny label under one reads, "Used on the first day of peace with Venice." Another, "Refused during the cherry incident of 1578. Oh, 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 oh." You stifle a laugh. The cherry incident? A gray-bearded artisan notices your smile. He was served sour cherries out of season, he explains. It caused a diplomatic chill. You decide not to ask what kind of chill. You're starting to understand the tone of the empire. Things are never said directly. They're plated. The artisan lifts a spoon and shows you its perfect curve. "This one," he whispers. He used twice, without realizing it. That means it's lucky. You nod solemnly. In the Ottoman court, luck and silver are close cousins. Elsewhere, in the utensil registry, every fork, knife, ladle, and cup is catalogued its history, usage, and even its travel record. Yes, travel. If the Sultan takes a liking to a particular teacup, it's packed and taken on campaign, packed by gloved hands, inspected twice. It's said that during one journey to Belgrade, the Sultan's breakfast tray required an extra cart, not for food, for the equipment. Historians still debate whether this was extravagance or simply risk management. "You can't rule a continent with the wrong bowl," one scribe once noted. Fair enough. Back in the courtyard, you join a group of junior cooks seated in the shade, studying flashcards. Yes, flashcards. Each one with a dish name on one side and its province, season, and preferred garnish on the other. "Zerde?" a boy asks. "Sweet saffron rice." "Edern," almond slivers. "Keshkek," wheat stew. "Central Anatolia." "Should never be served before noon." They nod, recite, repeat. One of them misses an answer and is pelted with a chickpea. It's a strangely affectionate scene. You lean back against a warm wall and close your eyes for a moment. You dream of trays floating, gleaming, silently demanding precision. You're woken by the distant sound of a reed flute, soft, melancholic. You rise and follow it. It leads you to the breakfast garden. Yes, it exists. A small enclosed patch of earth where herbs are grown just for the Sultan's breakfast mint, basil, dill, tarragon, but also roses, violets, lavender, edible flowers to float in his tea or decorate his cheese. The gardener here is stooped and silent, her hands always moving, her expression somewhere between reverence and exhaustion. She gestures for you to smell a leaf. It smells like memory. Everything begins here, she says softly. Before the spoon, before the fire, before the salt, the scent. You believe her. As the sun arcs higher, the garden glows, and in that light, you begin to grasp the sacred absurdity of it all. A man rules an empire but not before tasting his yogurt. He negotiates peace, but only after choosing the correct spoon. His moods shift kingdoms, but so do his figs. And so, 66 chefs rise before dawn to serve not just breakfast, but balance, beauty, and the illusion that the world, for one brief hour, is in perfect order. You walk slowly now, past trays being polished, aprons folded, herbs harvested, and menus whispered in dark corners. The Sultan may speak little, but his breakfast? It speaks volumes. The Sultan has returned to his private chamber. The breakfast trays are cleared, the silver spoons tucked into velvet, and the palace air carries the faintest sigh of relief. But beneath the silk-wrapped calm of Topkapi, there's a quiet thrill building. Because this next momentous what the entire morning was building toward. You're back at the threshold of his inner room, where the lattice screens cast geometric shadows across polished floors. The scent inside has changed. Less of cinnamon and rosewater now, more of musk, sandalwood, and a hint of fresh parchment. It's the unmistakable smell of post-breakfast reflection. The Sultan lounges now, in a robe of emerald green, a cup of water balanced loosely in one hand. Not a word has been spoken in the last 5 minutes. That's just how he is. And there, beside him, laid gently on a satin-covered stand, is the spoon. It rests like a relic, part jewel, part instrument, part psychological weapon. The spoon. The same golden spoon you've been hearing about all morning. Yes, the one inlaid with lapis lazuli, edges so thin they disappear on the tongue. Forged by a blind artisan in Bursa, who was said to shape spoons by feel alone, and once wept over an olive wood ladle he called too perfect to live. This spoon has a name, Ferahnume. It means bringer of ease. Because when the Sultan chooses this spoon, and only this spoon, it means the empire has pleased him. You don't ask how anyone knows this. You don't need to. In Topkapi, knowledge is osmosis. A steward now approaches quietly and asks if the Sultan would like to write. The Sultan gestures to his calligraphy stand. The servant brings him the reed pen, the special one. You know the one he uses only when the breakfast was exceptionally contemplative. You lean back against a carved column, watching this quiet ritual unfold. The Sultan dips the pen in ink, hesitates, and begins to write. You can't see the words. No one can. But you know the paper will be folded, sealed, and placed in the private archive. A record not of politics or policy, but of digestion, mood, and memory. One story says a sultan once wrote a love poem to a slice of quince. Another time, he wrote 3 words. The trout was overconfident. It caused a diplomatic standoff with a Black Sea province. Probably a coincidence. But no one forgot. Outside the chamber, life is returning to a gentler pace. You make your way past the hall of waiting spoons, a place where unused utensils are cleaned, oiled, and yes, rested. Not all spoons are used in rotation. Some must lie dormant until the Sultan calls for them. It's said one mother-of-pearl spoon once waited 13 years for its moment. When it was finally used, the Sultan declared it comforting. It retired that same day. In the next room, a set of spoons is being tested for texture. Not taste. Texture. A chef gently taps each against his lower lip. You'd expect mockery, but another's reverence in it. The Sultan's lip is his mood ring. One mutters, "We serve accordingly." You step out into a side corridor now, and spot something new, a young apprentice, carrying a small box tied in velvet ribbon. Inside? Today's chosen spoon. It will now undergo its full post-service ritual. First, cleaned with rose water and a soft linen cloth soaked in morning dew. Yes, it's collected daily. Second, placed under a clay dome filled with thyme steam to erase any lingering flavor. Third, tucked into its cedar drawer between layers of lavender and clove to rest until its next summoning. You follow the apprentice as he performs these steps with quiet ceremony. His hands don't tremble, but he doesn't speak either, not even to himself. When he finishes, he bows not to the spoon, but to the idea of tanned leaves. You linger, glancing around the spoon room, walls lined with small labeled drawers. One bears a scuffed engraving, the spoon of rain. Another simply says, "Do not ask." You feel you're in a temple. Back in the Sultan's chamber, the breakfast moment is nearly over. He's now sipping cool water infused with mint and pomegranate blossom. It's the final actone sip, and the morning becomes memory. He sets the cup down. The room holds its breath. Then he speaks. A single sentence. "Let the record show today was sweet." That's all. But it echoes. Within minutes, a scribe in another part of the palace will write down the words, "Sweet." It will go into the Breakfast Chronicle, a vast document tracking the Sultan's culinary feedback across decades. That sentence will affect tomorrow's spice blends. It will reach the provinces by carrier pigeon. It might even adjust the schedule of trade ships bearing apricots. You step out of the chamber, a little dazed. You weren't just a witness to breakfast. You were a witness to ceremony, myth, ritual, art, and bureaucracy, so tangled it might as well be magic. You take a slow stroll through the open-air walkway now, warm tiles beneath your feet, sparrows chattering lazily in the eaves. You hear a young cook muttering to himself as he tests a spoonful of custard. Needs more patience. Another taste. Another pause. Now it's almost wisdom. And somehow, that makes perfect sense to you. Back in the courtyard of sunlight, the tray is being prepared again, not for eating, but for display. Yes, the breakfast tray, the actual one from today, is cleaned and briefly shown in the viewing hall, where senior staff and record keepers examine its layout. Why? Because breakfast is an event, and all events must be documented, dissected, and filed. You step into the room and see the tray laid out with little paper markers. Spoon placement. Ideal. Rose jam untouched. Noted. Apricot compote devoured. Strong political suggestion. You realize something strange. This isn't obsession. It's devotion. The Sultan's breakfast is not a meal. It's a mirror. And the spoon? It's a wand. One gesture. And the mood of a nation shifts. You walk away slowly, the image of the golden spoon still glowing faintly in your mind. You pass a line of cooks preparing trays for tomorrow. One hums a lullaby. Another balances a silver pot on her head for practice. The day presses on, but the spoon rests, and when it is summoned again, the empire will hold its breath. Just when you think the palace couldn't possibly have more corners, more chambers, more silent rituals tied to the Sultan's breakfast, you're led quietly, reverently through a narrow hallway lined with tiles the color of deep twilight. A eunuch guides you without words. He simply gestures, palms upward, and you follow. He brings you to a place very few in the palace ever see, the Room of Interruptions. Yes, that's its name. No, you didn't mishear it. This is the chamber where all potential disruptions to the Sultan's breakfast are absorbed. Not stopped, not denied. Absorbed. If news must be delivered, if messengers arrive, if the world outside the palace dares breathe too loudly, it must pass through here first. And it's always someone's worst day. You step inside. The room is hushed and windowless, with stone benches and a few small side tables. A wall of polished wood bears dozens of brass hooks, each one labeled with a different category: unverified rumor, minor intrigue, spilled dish, bird strike, and so on. At the far end sits a man known only as the Breakfast Keeper, a title no one wants but someone must bear. His job? To decide if a disruption is serious enough to breach the morning meal. Today, he's holding a small rolled parchment. His eyes flick across it. Storm in Bursa, he murmurs. But no ships involved. Delay it. He pins it to the wait until dessert board. A soldier arrives, dusty and breathless. He bows and presents a sealed envelope. The keeper reads, "Then Zeiss, tell the ambassador he may present his gift after the melon." You raise an eyebrow. The keeper notices. "Protocol," he says flatly. "No fruit. No foreigner." Apparently, the Sultan once received a letter from the King of France just after biting into a pickled radish. It soured both the snack and diplomatic relations. Ever since, foreign communications wait for sweet things to enter the bloodstream. Historians still argue whether this event directly caused the 9-month cheese tariff crisis that followed. In the room of interruptions, it's not about danger, it's about mood. A hawk lands in the outer courtyard? Pause the tea. A cat knocks over the candied almonds? Replace the whole tray. A vizier sneezes near the honey dish? Full spoon rotation. Everything matters. Everything is monitored. You walk back through the palace corridors, trying to decide if you're amused, amazed, or gently losing your grip on what a normal morning looks like. You stop at a small shaded cloister, where a janissarius, an actual elite palace guardess, polishing a tray with astonishing focus. You ask why. He shrugs. The Sultan once said he liked how the fig reflected in it. That was 37 years ago. They still polish the tray just so. Nearby, a steward inspects a new batch of linen napkins. Each one must be ironed, folded, and embroidered with a different symbol. A lion, a tulip, a ship. The napkin the Sultan chooses is, naturally, interpreted as an omen. Choose the lion? Strength. The tulip? Peace. The ship? Someone is going on a journey. Maybe you. Today, he chose the pomegranate, which means, well, no one is entirely sure, but everyone pretends they are. You find your way back to the pavilion of notes, a small tiled chamber where two scribes sit cross-legged, transcribing the events of the morning from memory. Not politics, not military movements. Breakfast impressions. Did he touch the tahini? One asks. Number. He glanced, but no spoon. Right. Considered but withheld. Another scroll notes the number of bites from the fish pastry. 5. Which is either a reference to the 5 pillars of Islam or a coincidence. Let the readers decide, the scribe says. You stifle a laugh. The official breakfast record is a scroll now 12 feet long. It includes spoon angles, napkin folds, tray temperature, melon trajectory, and what kind of birds flew overhead. 2 doves, 1 magpie. The magpie was deemed ominous, but not alarming. Suddenly, someone rushes in. A small slip of paper in hand. The Sultan paused before the last bite. He whispers. The scribes freeze. Was it thoughtful? One asks. Very. Was it regretful? Maybe. They nod gravely. A line is added. The final bite was tempered with memory. Elsewhere in the palace, you pass a room filled with folded notes. Anonymous feedback from kitchen staff, eunuchs, guards, and scent testers. Yes, scent testers. Their job is to inhale the air between breakfast and midday prayer to ensure the mood lingers correctly. One note reads, the yogurt scent lingered beautifully near the cypress gate. Recommend repetition. Another, The silver tray was too reflective. The sun bounced into my eye. The note is unsigned. The complaint, however, is noted. Even silence has structure here. The silence warden, a soft-footed man in dark robes, is responsible for making sure all sounds near the Sultan's breakfast chamber remain within acceptable limits. He carries a string of tiny bells in his bell teach, one tuned to the sound of a spoon striking porcelain. If any clang louder than the model bell, they are banned. Today, no bells rang, which is considered auspicious. You duck into a narrow spiral staircase and emerge in the scent dome, a small room directly above the breakfast hall. Here, oils and perfumes are heated to ensure the breakfast air remains layered with sandalwood, citrus, and the faintest whiff of cardamom. One misstep, and the yogurt will taste like roses. A man is fanning the oil pots gently. How do you know when it's right? You ask. He closes eyes, breathes deeply. When the air no longer competes, he says. You stare at him, unsure if he's describing scent or empire. Probably both. Down below, the Sultan is on the move again. His robes trail like stories behind him, silent and deliberate. He has eaten, sipped, and spoken. The tray has been returned. And now, he heads to the tulip garden, not for governance, not for ceremony, just to walk, to breathe, to let the breakfast settle where decisions are made, not in the stomach, but in the space between a taste and a thought. The tulips, hundreds of them, nod in the soft breeze. Their petals match the saffron rice he barely touched. And you realize the Sultan is no longer hungry, but the empire? Always. The tulip garden unfurls before you like a silent parade. 1,000 slender stems sway gently under the early afternoon sun, red, yellow, white, and the rarest of all, the deep violet tulip so prized it has its own keeper. No, not a gardenera keeper of the violet bloom, who watches over precisely 5 of these flowers and keeps a log of their daily condition. You step through the pebble-strewn path, careful not to disturb a single leaf. Somewhere in the distance, a reed flute sighs through the air, as if the palace itself is exhaling after the morning's pageantry. And then you see him, the Sultan, not seated on a throne, not surrounded by scribes or guards, just walking, hands clasped behind his back, his slippers soft on the stone. No entourage, just 2 eunuchs at a respectful distance and a court falcon on a perch nearby, watching the garden like a feathered vizier. This is the part of the day few see. The digestion of empire, not the physical sort, though yes, the melon must settle, the yogurt must do its work. But more importantly, this is where decisions ferment, where flavors become thoughts, and silence becomes strategy. You fall into step at a distance, barely breathing, and watch as the Sultan pauses near a white tulip. He leans in, just enough to smell it, then walks on. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. You recall what a steward whispered earlier. If he spends more than 2 breaths with the white tulip, expect good news. You count. 1, 2, 3. Interesting. Back at the palace kitchens, the chefs are already parsing the wok. He went past the violet bloom first, says one. That means he's nostalgic. No, says another. It means he wants something sweet again tomorrow. Same thing, someone mutters. You sit under a fig tree in the garden's edge, notebook in hand, trying to sketch what just happened. But how do you draw a man deciding the future, based on flower scent and candied trout? Historians still debate how much weight these tulip walks carried. Some say they were mere rituals, poetic moments to unwind. Others insist treaties were mentally sealed between the fig bush and the third marble bench. One record from 1586 simply reads, "He touched the red tulip twice. Vizier appointed same afternoon. Coincidence? Maybe. But in top copy, maybe his power. Back among the flower beds, The Sultan finally sits in a stone bench, curved like a crescent moon. A page arrives, barefoot, holding a list of requests. These are not formal petitions. These are whispers gathered from the kitchen, the scullery, the servants' halls, requests for changes to menu protocol, minor spice substitutions, a new recipe to be considered. The page reads quietly, a new blend of rose vinegar from Kütahya, a request to replace fig jam with quince preserves on Fridays, a suggestion to return to the softer honey from Van. The Sultan listens. No change in his expression. Then, a pause. And a chef wishes to present a new preparation of wheat porridge infused with saffron, cloves, and a drop of black molasses. The Sultan raises an eyebrow, not in disdain, in memory. You feel it too. That's the porridge from his childhood. That recipe has been banned since his father's reign, after a particularly unfortunate rumor involving sour cream and betrayal. But now, maybe it's time. The Sultan speaks just once. Let it be tasted. And that's it. A porridge will be reborn. And perhaps a chef will ascend. Back in the kitchens, word spreads like spice on a hot wind. The porridge is back. Someone breathes. The chef, responsibly quiet man with thick wrists and a poetry tattoo on his forearm, sits down hard on a stool. I need a better pot, he mutters. You watch the ripple travel. Across the cutting tables, through the pantry, past the boy slicing lemons into perfect coins. A single spoonful from tomorrow may carry the flavor of memory, and that means pressure. A dish is never just a dish, especially not when it returns from exile. You leave the garden and head toward the room of spoons in Waitinga, quieter cousin to the main spoon room. Here lie the contenders, the utensils not yet used, or used long ago and waiting for rebirth. Each spoon rests on a velvet pillow, tagged with a tiny inscription, carved in exile. Returned with the honey wave, rejected twice, forgiven once. A hopeful curve. You run your fingers lightly over the edge of one walnut wood, smooth, modest, honest. It was once used by a scribe who became a vizier. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe spoons choose their moment. You're starting to believe that. You return to the outer corridor as the sun shifts toward afternoon. The tulips shimmer. A steward passes you, carrying a tray not of food, but of unused ingredients from today's breakfast. They will be catalogued, returned to the ingredient library, or donated to the lower kitchens. Except for one item, a single piece of baklava, untouched, unclaimed. That's strange. The steward frowns. No one leaves baklava, he murmurs. Not even the Sultan. He makes a note, sends a boy running to check whether it was too crisp, too sweet, too political. You trail behind him, back to the taste adjustment wing, where food not chosen is re-examined like failed diplomats. The baklava is tasted by two chefs and a herbalist. They whisper. It was too quiet, one says. Needs orange blossom, says another. Or a story, the herbalist mutters. Yes, apparently even baklava needs narrative. You glance again at the baklava. It's perfect. And yet, it didn't sing. So it's gone. Back to the ledger. Marked rework. Removed from the table of influence. Because if a bite doesn't carry meaning, it doesn't belong. That is the rule. You return to the garden one last time. The Sultan has risen. He walks past the tulips again, but now he's humming. A note from a childhood melody. You don't recognize it, but the gardener does. She smiles. The porridge song, she says. And just like that, tomorrow has already begun. It's late afternoon now, and the palace is glowing, the kind of glow that only comes after something important has been quietly, seamlessly completed. The breakfast, long over, has settled into legend for the day. And yet, around every marble pillar and woven curtain, traces of it linger. You walk into the hall of reflection, a little-known space not marked on any official maps. Its ceiling is low, and its walls are lined with shelves of soft-bound scrolls, featherlight books, and a few small paintings. This is where breakfast becomes memory. A young scribe greets you with ink-stained fingers and a flick of his quill. "Looking for today's record?" he asks, already pulling a scroll before you can answer. It's not fully dry yet, but you can peek. He unfurls the morning scroll across a cedar table. Time of first spoonful, just after second light. Spoon chosen Faranem. Mood, reflective, possibly nostalgic, pending tulip confirmation. Most consumed dish. Apricot compote, as predicted. Least engaged dish. Baklava, under inquiry. Speech. Let the record show today was sweet. You smile. You were there. You saw it all happen. But here it is flattened into record. Tagged, sealed, indexed. History is hungry, but it's always exact. The scribe gently rolls it closed. We keep them all. Every day. Since Murad II. You raise your eyebrows. There are scrolls older than the oldest tree in the garden, he adds. One day, maybe, we'll find the one that explains the cherry incident. You leave the scroll room with a gentle chuckle, and as you step back into the corridor, something draws your eye: a small alcove carved into the wall, half hidden by a hanging tapestry. Inside, a box, no larger than a loaf of bread, wrapped in silk, guarded by no one. You crouch and open it gently. Inside are the notes that didn't make the scroll, the unofficial ones, each a small square of linen paper, handwritten by handmaids, cooks, Guard 7 the falconer. Thoughts not meant for record, but too important to ignore. He paused longer over the yogurt today. The tray was balanced. The hall felt full. The cat sat under his chair again. He didn't move her. He looked up after the melon. None of these mean anything on their own, but together, they form a picture, a sense, a softness. Because breakfast isn't about what's eaten. It's about how it's eaten, how the air feels, how the spoon sounds, whether the bite is followed by silence or thought. You walk past the kitchens again, now quieter, cooler, filled with the gentle sounds of preparation for the evening meal. Not as elaborate as breakfast, of course, but still important, still deliberate. Inside the herbal chamber, two women are gently pounding dried mint into powder, mixing it with lemon zest and sugar. For tomorrow's yogurt, one explains. He prefers it slightly green this season. Another mixes clove oil into a thick paste of pear and honey. For the porridge, she whispers. Yes, that porridge. You glance around and spot the chef, the one who proposed its return. He's sitting alone, staring into a small copper pot, not cooking, just remembering. You sit beside him. Will he like it? You ask. He shrugs. It's not about liking. It's about whether it still feels like it belongs. You nod. He reaches into a folded napkin and pulls out a tiny carved spoon plane, wooden and clearly handmade. This was my grandmother's, he says. She used it to stir porridge for my grandfather every morning. Even after he died. You don't say anything, because nothing needs to be said. Back in the courtyard, the tray archivist is finishing his sketches. Yes, there's a tray archivist. She sketches each morning's layout before it's disturbed. Positioning, spacing, light reflections. The breakfast tray, she believes, is a temporary constellation. She shows you today's drawing. It looks like a map. Not of geography, but of feelings. She points. The rose jam created tension here. The yogurt opened it up. But the melon? That's the breath. You blink and see it. The tray isn't a meal. It's a composition, a symphony of scent and color and silence. One that plays only once, and never again. You wander toward the silver room, where utensils are now being cleaned, dried, and laid in preparation for tomorrow. One worker hums softly as she polishes a soup ladle. Another is threading a cord of saffron, threads through the handles of spoons to keep them from tangling. The spoon steward, not to be confused with the spoonmaker, reviews a short list. He's deciding tomorrow's candidates. He looks up at you. Farinam will rest, he says. Too much power for 2 days in a row. You ask what comes next. He smiles and holds up a thin, delicate spoon made of coral wood. This one is called saber, he says. It means patience. You nod. Good choice. Out in the almond grove, 2 young cooks rehearse the walk to the Sultan's chamber. Their arms are outstretched, tray-balanced, eyes half-closed. They practice not walking. They practice arriving. A third corrects them gently. Remember, he must hear your footsteps, but only faintly. Enough to know you're human. Another rule, one of many. You head back toward the quiet hall, where tomorrow's menu board is already taking shape. Chalk lines, arrows, notes, swapped ingredients, potential risks, and at the very bottom, a small drawing, a single tulip, the same color as memory. You stop, exhale, and for a moment, just a moment, you feel what the chefs must feel, that you are feeding not a man, not a court, not a people, but something older, a rhythm, an idea, a sultan, who, even now, is probably staring into the garden, wondering if breakfast tomorrow will bring back the shape of a dream he can almost but not quite taste. By now, the sun hangs low over the palace, casting golden shadows across the courtyards and wrapping Topkapi in a soft amber hush. The pace has slowed. The tulips have closed. The pages have stopped running, at least for a while. But deep in the kitchens, yes, even now the air still carries the scent of cardamom, lemon peel, and roasted almonds. Because even when breakfast is over, it never really ends. You're back at the invisible wing, a place most palace visitors never even know exists. This is where the signs of breakfast, the spoons, bowls, linens, fruit peels, and unfinished morsels go, not just to be cleaned, but erased. Removed from history, cleared like footprints in sand before the next tide. The staff here wear no colored robes, no embroidery. They move like shadows. Their steps are soundless, their eyes downcast, not out of shame, out of precision. Their job isn't to be noticed. It's to make things forgettable. You enter a long, stone-walled room, known as the Hall of Steam, where dishes are washed not with water alone but with herbal vapor, lavender for the cups, mint for the spoons, clove smoke for the trays. There's no scrubbing, no splashing, just hovering, swirling mist that clings to silver and memory alike. One worker, her hands wrapped in soft linen, gently lifts a soup bowl and places it into a hollowed copper basin. A pot of thyme water below it begins to bubble. She lowers a dome, waits. When she lifts it again, the bowl shines, but not just with polish, with silence. Now it forgets, she whispers. You walk past a stack of folded napkins, each marked with a tiny stitch in one corner. These marks tell the napkin's history, which meal it served, which hand used it, if it wiped honey or jam. When a napkin accumulates 10 stitches, it's retired. Not discarded. Retired. Sent to the cloth library, where it is preserved with other fabrics that have witnessed too much. Yes, really, the napkins have their own library. You pass through another door into the polishing hall, where a row of young men and women are buffing serving trays with slow, rhythmic motions. Not circles. Not back and forth. A spiral pattern, inward, always inward. They say this method draws the meal back into itself, like a secret folding shut. On the far wall, a chalkboard lists yesterday's trays and their final outcomes. Tray 17A. Apricot glaze residue. Acceptable, dreamy mood. Tray 22C. Mino fig smia. Questionable. Under review. Tray 30B. Spoon mark too far left. Logged as symbolic unease. You stare and realize every tray is a canvas, every bite a brush stroke. And these are the critics. Quiet, methodical, herb, scented critics. Outside the polishing room, you find yourself in the courtyard of crumbs. Yes, that's what it's called. Because everything that falls from the Sultan's breakfast breadcrumbs, fruit skins, dried herbs gathered here. Not discarded. Collected. Categorized. Why? For distribution. Some of the crumbs go to the palace pigeons. Others to the cats. Still, others are mixed into pastes and distributed to the house of kindness, where the poor receive offerings that once shared a tray with empire. A boy arrives with a linen bundle and places it on the sorting table. Inside, 3 melon seeds, a strip of orange peel, and 1 bite of untouched honey bread. The overseer examines them with tweezers. Melon seeds to the garden, orange peel to the distillery, bread to the mint hall, he'll want it tomorrow. Even leftovers have a destiny. At the far end of the courtyard, a wizened woman crushes dried herbs in a stone bowl. The Sultan didn't touch the rosemary today. She mutters. That changes the vinegar. You sit beside her, watch as she bottles a new blend, labels it with the date and the mood. Late joy. Moderate stillness. And you begin to realize, nothing here is wasted. Not a flavor. Not a moment. Not a crumb. Back in the kitchens, the checklist scribe is making her final rounds. She doesn't cook. She doesn't taste. She just confirms. Every morning, she checks 273 items. Every afternoon, she closes the record. She walks past a line of cooling ladles and calls out without looking. Salt level of the yogurt? Whispers only. Someone answers. She checks it off. Rose density of the jam? Medium heavy. Good weight. Check. She pauses at you. Were you present for the final spoon lift? You nod. She marks. Witness confirmed. It feels oddly official. As the day winds down, the second shift cooks begin filtering in. Their aprons are crisp, their expressions less urgent. Dinner is formal, yes. But dinner doesn't carry the gravity of breakfast. Dinner is theater. Breakfast is prophecy. One of them passes you and says, "He asked for the spoon called sabr." That means patience. We'll serve lamb tonight. You blink. How is that connected? He shrugs. He never chooses saber unless he's thinking about his childhood. And when he's nostalgic, he wants lamb. Of course, you walk past the garden again, where a gardener is trimming fig trees in near silence. She looks up and says, "They say he smiled today." You nod. "Then tomorrow," she says, "will be simple. And maybe it will be. Or maybe it'll be another morning of swirling trays, vanished baklava, and the return of porridge from the shadows. You sit on a stone bench beneath the olive trees. The air smells like memory. And somewhere, deep in the palace kitchens, someone is testing the lemon level in a syrup that might just become a moment in history. Because this isn't food. It's reflection. And the Sultan? He hasn't even asked for breakfast yet. But the empire is already cooking. The palace has entered its quiet hour now, the space between day and dusk, where voices soften and footsteps slow. The pigeons on the rooflines have stopped fluttering and begun settling, and the wind carries the faintest scent of roasted coriander drifting in from some distant simmering pot. And yet, beneath this blanket of calm, another transformation is taking place. Because even as dinner stirs and meetings dwindle, The breakfast staff is waking up again. Not physically. Most haven't slept yet. Some won't. But their minds are already pivoting toward tomorrow. Because in Topkapi Palace, tomorrow's meal begins. The moment today's is forgotten. You find yourself back in the dormitory of cooks, a warm stone hall lined with low beds, wool blankets, and the occasional battered recipe scroll tucked beneath a pillow. Most beds are empty. Those who rest do so in short, calculated naps, 20 minutes here, an hour there. Time is rationed like saffron. A young baker is sprawled on his mattress, a torn slip of paper clutched in his fist. You peer at it gently, a sketch of a new bread twist, shaped like a tulip with a honey core. You smile. Near him, another apprentice sharpens his knife gently, rhythmically. Not for show. For apples. The Sultan expects apple slices with his tea tomorrow. They must be skinless, seamless, breath-thin. You leave them and head for the night review hall, a place lit by oil lamps and scented with cloves. This is where the senior staff reviews every detail of the day and prepares for dawn. At the center table, the head cook leans forward, tapping his quill against a list. "He didn't finish the cheese," he says softly. "What does that mean?" "Possibly fatigue," someone offers. "Or avoidance," says another. "It was goat cheese." A quiet murmur. "He hasn't touched goat cheese since the treaty with Moldavia." A scroll is consulted. Notes made. Then a whisper. "He lingered over the spoon." They all nod. "He never lingers over the spoon." The quill scribbles. "Possible introspection. Suggest mild porridge. Avoid sour." You slip into the shadows and find yourself wandering into the test kitchen, a place so quiet it almost hums. Here, new dishes are born in near silence. A woman is carefully layering candied lemon peel into a chilled bowl of yogurt. She tastes it, frowns, adds a flake of salt, tastes again, smiles. "He'll remember this," she murmurs. In the far corner, a duo is braiding pastry dough with silken threads of honey. They do not speak. They are practicing rhythm. The pattern must match the Sultan's own prayer beads, one plate for each whisper of the divine. Historians often overlook this, the art within the art. The idea that food, here, is not just cooked. It's composed, balanced, like poetry, tied to seasons, to mood, to empire. A slice of apricot may be summer itself. A curl of cheese, winter in Edirne. You pass the dream wall, a strange, lovely invention of the bakers. A place where cooks pin tiny scraps of paper with dream dishes they hope to serve someday. Some are elaborate drawings. Others are single words. Ice and rose. Fig petals. Bread shaped like a tulip shadow. Most will never make it to the tray, but some do. Back outside, the courtyard of tomorrow is quiet, save for the sound of kneading. Two apprentices press dough into forms under starlight. A senior chef passes and nods. "Press it with memory," he says, "not force." The ovens are being rekindled, the coals stirred. Wood chosen cherry for sweetness, walnut for depth. A ladle of lemon water is boiled to cleanse the morning ladles. And the spoons? They're being lined up in velvet rows. Not the show spoons, the first taste spoons. The ones no one sees but all rely on. One is missing. Panic? Number? Just a moment. Then it's found, tucked in a linen pouch near the spice ledger. It had been brought out for measuring nutmeg. Nutmeg always causes excitement. You find yourself drifting toward the silence wing, a place not named for its hush but for its purpose. This is where the silence between bites is studied. Yes, studied. Scribes here, Record the Sultan's pauses between spoonfuls. Was he meditative? Distracted? Calculating? One scroll includes this entry. Pause after compote. Contemplative. Likely memory of Edernay Gardens. Another. Pause before final bite. Disrupted by peacock call. Spoon replaced. They read these pauses like astronomers read stars. You pass a doorway where an old woman is blending a powder of rose petals, mint, and crushed sugar. Scent layer for the melon, she explains. You don't ask why. You just nod. Because you understand now. Nothing is casual. Not a leaf. Not a curl. Not a spoon. The tray room is nearly ready. Tomorrow's trays are being arranged. Not fully loaded, of course, but framed. The space is marked for dishes, not yet cooked. A brass marker says, melon. If mood is soft, fig. Only if porridge succeeds. The trays are laid out like maps, like blueprints, like dreams. A steward adjusts the light on one. Too direct, he says. We want reflection, not interrogation. You stop beside a young boy polishing a napkin ring. Why do we do all this, you ask? He shrugs, then says, because the Sultan never says he's happy. He just finishes the meal. You stare at him. That's it, isn't it? The whole empire is waiting not for a speech, not for an edict, not even for a smile, but for an empty plate. That's the signal. That's the blessing. You step back outside. The stars are fully awake now. The tulips are still. The kitchen glows. And inside, a single note is being placed on the head cook's table. Tomorrow, the porridge returns. He reads it, smiles, then adds one more line. Begin with yogurt. Of course. Always. The moon is high over Topkapi now, casting silver across domes and terraces, making the stone glisten like chilled marble. The palace has quieted into its deepest hush, the kind only centuries of routine can produce. And within that hush, the kitchen stirs once more. It's the final rotation of the night, the porridge watch. Yes, it's real. A designated team of 4 chefs and 2 herbalists, all trained specifically for the delicate overnight brewing of saffron porridge. Not any porridge. The porridge, the one that came back from exile on a whisper, carried by memory, sanctioned by tulip. You slip into the heat hall, where porridge is born. The room is warm, dim, filled with the smell of toasted wheat and faint clove. The porridge simmers in a copper cauldron, stirred continuously with a long spoon made of pear wood soft enough not to bruise the starch. The liquid glows faintly golden, kissed with saffron, flickering in the low lamplight like molten sun. A chef tastes, sighs. Still remembering, he mutters. What do you mean, you ask? He taps the side of the pot. This dish. It remembers. It must carry the feeling he had when he was a child. Not the flavorth feeling. Thirst. Thirst. This. You sit beside the fire. Listen. The porridge bubbles like a sleeping heartbeat. The chef adds a pinch of salt. Waits. Then sugar. Waits. It's like watching someone compose a lullaby. Across the hall, the spoon of the day lies on a silk cloth. Saber, patience, chosen for tomorrow. Its wood is polished but unadorned. No jewels, no gold. Just honesty, and a soft bend near the bowl that matches the angle of the Sultan's right thumb. It will be used first, to taste the porridge. And if the spoon passes through without resistance, if the porridge clings just so, then the dish is ready. Until then, they wait. Nearby, a boy fans the coals. He hums something ancient. A tune passed down by kitchen elders. You don't understand the words, but the rhythm is clear. One note for each breath between stirs. The head herbalist steps forward, holding a small pouch. Inside, powdered mastic and dried rose. He sprinkles the blend lightly over the simmering surface. The aroma lifts into the air sweet, clean, slightly nostalgic. Now, he whispers, let it thicken in silence. And so it does. You leave them and walk the stone corridors one last time. Past the darkened spoon room, past the cooling trays, resting under linen covers, past the melon archive. Yes, it exists. Every corner holds the residue of a day built around one meal. You pause by the scribe's alcove, where the chronicler is finishing the last lines of the breakfast report. His reed pen scratches softly. Mood, mellow, spoon, chosen slowly. Final bite, unhurried. He stops, thinks, adds, memory was present. He dries the ink, rolls the scroll, binds it, then files it into a shelf marked, days that smelled like fig. Yes, that's a real category. You descend into the fragrance vaulted chamber, carved below the kitchens, where scent samples from every breakfast are preserved in sealed glass vials. You lean close to one. The label says, Spring Morning, Apricots with Stillness. Another, Honey, Silence, Slight Regret. They preserve these to recreate moods, to anticipate the Sultan's seasonal inclinations. It said one time a chef matched a scent from 15 years earlier, and the Sultan closed his eyes and said, "This was the day before my father died." He finished the meal, asked no questions. The scent was never used again. You climb back up into the listening walkway, a thin hallway with a grate that opens above the Sultan's sleeping chamber. Not to spy, to listen, for movement, for murmurs, for signs of appetite. Right now, nothing. Just the long, peaceful breathing of a man who has ruled through silence, choice, and spoon. You walk one last lap around the tray chamber. The trays are stacked, arranged, dusted, blessed. Tomorrow's is already half assembled. Yogurt, always first. Porridge, centerpiece. Dried figs with rose glaze, optional. One tulip, still closed. The tray glows under the lantern light. You sit beside it. Just for a moment, and then the bell rings. Once. Soft. That's all. The first kitchen bell. The day begins again. You're still there, seated beside the polished tray. The glow of the lantern dimming, the palace around you curled in deep stillness. The kitchen has not stirred again. Not fully, but it will soon. The coals will be stoked, the ovens lit, the spoons placed in their cradles like small, quiet stars. The porridge continues to hum. And above you, the Sultan sleeps breathing evenly, surrounded by gardens and memory. Let your shoulders sink a little now. Feel the weight of the empire soften around you. In a place where 66 chefs rise before dawn for one quiet moment, where spoons are carved for a man's thumb, and where no meal is ever just food, even stillness has flavor. You breathe in. The air carries saffron, steam, and the faintest touch of rose. You breathe out, and the palace, in its own way, breathes with you. Let that spoon rest. Let that porridge thicken. Just a little more. Let the ovens wait, the trays pause, the scrolls fold shut. There's no urgency here, no haste. Only the quiet promise of another morning, another plate, another empire, held together by flavor and patience. So, settle in. Loosen your grip. Dim your thoughts like they dim the oil lamps gently, gradually with respect. And remember, here, in this place of polished silence, nothing is ever wasted. Not even the pause between bites. Not even the way you fall asleep. Good night. Sleep deeply. And when you wake, may your own spoon find something sweet,